Ladies and gentlemen, it's episode number 5 of Hard Corner with your hosts, Dale and Eric. Gentlemen, today we talk about Uvalde, and we break down some video that we find on YouTube and get your professional experience. Take it away.
Sounds great. I'll just start off by saying this is probably, and I don't know if Eric will agree or disagree, one of the biggest failures in law enforcement history. A lot of mistakes were made. We talk about this a lot when we teach folks about how to respond to active aggressor events. So that's my piece to say to it. But it definitely it's heartbreaking as to how that situation concluded.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of criticizing the guys down there. Never been there. Never been through their training, don't know their resources, but I told you guys before, there's not a national standard to this, so I don't know what their training or protocols were. They may be good people and have good hearts, but they made some big mistakes, but we got to learn from it. And the reason being is because, like we said, you could have somebody show up to an incident that you're at, and you need to know what to do before they get there because you may be on your own for a little bit.
And I think when we watch this, we're probably going to see some reoccurring themes where the proper tactics and tenets of responding to an active aggressor were not met up to the standard of. I mean, we'll kind of point those out. And again, like Eric said, we're not trying to criticize people based upon who they are as a person, but how they responded to an event.
All right, guys. So this is really interesting for me to hear you say this. I'm thinking as a civilian or, just a person who I have not chosen a career path that puts myself in harm's way as a law enforcement professional would. So you're talking about this being done, there's things that you're going to be able to, with your experience, look at and say, this was done wrong. You're going to call it out. You're going to say it's wrong.
Correct.
What happens to law enforcement agencies when they make mistakes? Is there actual ramifications? For me as a civilian, I might get fired. I might get sued. What happens to law enforcement if they make mistakes?
Man, this is a whole cultural thing about law enforcement and admitting fault. Obviously, police officers are human. They're going to make mistakes. They make mistakes every day. The problem with it, though, is the minute they make a mistake, everybody in society jumps all over them. And they're immediately going to be fired, lose their job, get sued, but they also have the potential of losing their freedom, right? So they make mistake. The minute that's admitted, they're going to go to jail, possibly for however many years. So I know a lot of agencies, a lot of officers dig their heels in just because there's not an outlet to admit fault.
And I'll say this too. So Eric said earlier, there's not a standard for training. And what we found across the country doing what we do is the fact that without a training standard, how do you hold someone accountable for their actions? Legally, it's hard to do. There's some officers in another situation that happened in Florida that went to trial and got off because their training they were school resource officers and had a cumulative training time of 8 hours total.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of issues that go behind this. So let's just focus on the incident that day and the issues that we see on the video and see if we can kind of break it down a little bit.
Yeah, because we can get into this, and that'd be a whole other episode on training issues.
This could be a
culture.
8-hour podcast.
All right, gotcha. So we're talking about Uvalde. Here you go.
Correct.
Let me know where you want me to stop, and I'll be happy.
That NBC News one right there will be good.
All right, here. Okay. Yep. All right. So I'm just going to play the video. Tell me when to stop.
This is Dr. Lobo with the School District Police. Can you please put your firearm down?
Tonight, new video capturing crucial moments inside Uvalde's Robb Elementary School.
Go ahead, stop.
Open fire on May.
Yeah. Go ahead, stop. And getting right into it, you hear the officers giving verbal warning over an intercom or down the hallway. Shots are already fired. People are losing their life. You're in a school with children. The time for notification or giving verbal warning is over. You need to take immediate action now.
Yeah, and also too, in active aggressor situations, you're not there to de-escalate. Your de-escalation is your use of force. And if you saw that officer laying down, who was he laying down for? Himself, because that made him safer. We want you to drive. We want people to drive to that threat because, like Eric said, the loss of life is ongoing. And the more seconds or minutes it takes to get in there, that's the more loss of life that's going to occur.
And the officer or respondent has to understand he's potentially going to lose his life. That's the job.
And then
I'm not saying it's a suicide mission, but you got to press and you got to go in and put yourself in between the victim and the threat.
And
Okay,
also,
okay. Let me time out real quick there. Okay, so let's say I'm just thinking, maybe law enforcement sounds like a good career choice for me. This
It
kind of
is for
stuff
certain
matters.
people,
Yeah,
not
I
for
mean,
everyone.
I like my community, I like my neighborhood, I like my fellow man. I Sounds to me like being a police officer and protecting all of that freedom is a pretty cool career path. But now you're telling me I might die?
Yeah, I mean, there's the potential for that.
So
Yes.
on the teams, we had a priorities of life chart that the department mandated later on. It's hostages, civilians, police, then suspects, right? So we're not going to do anything since we're third tier priority on that. We're not doing anything that's going to help us if it's going to inhibit us from saving the first two, if that makes sense. So laying on the floor or using a shield or these other things that protect us are not what we're going to do because that's putting our life above the actual hostage, which is the highest priority.
But again, we're going to get into this thing. We're probably going to need a part 2 for this one, bro.
Probably so. Yeah, it's probably part 2.
But you got to understand too, don't compare apples and oranges. The average police officer in patrol, depending on what size of city they're in and what part of the country, doesn't receive that much tactical training, right? Your SWAT teams are going to get more high-end training. But again, not all SWAT teams are created equal. They don't get the same training in the same cities, in the same states. It's all different. But your average patrol officer who's going to be the first one responding to these incidents is very limited in their resources and their training, unless sometimes they go out on their own and pay for their own training. That's just a fact.
Nationwide, most officers, patrol officers, get probably 8 to 16 hours of active aggressor response training in the academy, and then that's it. That's it. And you have a 20 to 25-year career.
And that's not even all in the tactics.
Right.
That could be in decision making and other issues.
Imagine how much things change over time. So we could actually, great idea. Let's have a whole training podcast. We'll do that later.
We're gonna go part 2 on this one. But go ahead, Brent. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to keep track with you guys. You're saying a lot of really, really cool stuff here, but I'm just wrapping my head around this. Okay, so what you're saying is the patrol officer. This is the one I'm thinking of that pulls me over or comes and knocks on my door and tells me to turn down my stereo because the neighbors are complaining.
Mm-hmm.
That's a patrol officer, right?
Same guy showing up to the active shooter incident at the school.
Which to me sounds very different than writing a speeding ticket or telling somebody to turn the music. And while that might be a very small percentage of what they do in their daily, weekly, monthly, yearly career, they may never experience that. If they do, what you're saying is they have maybe 8 to 16 hours of training of how to handle that.
Correct.
Yep. And it's the highest stakes event you could have, and the least amount of training. We'll get hours and hours. Report writing, 40 hours in the police academy at least.
Yeah.
So it's just there's a difference in level of importance versus level of how often you do a function, right? So like an active aggressor is the highest importance, but you don't do it a lot, so you don't train a lot, but you get more training on stuff you do more frequently.
And just because you train at it one time doesn't mean you're good at it.
Right.
So again, that kind of goes back it kind of falls back on the departments for lack of training.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a hard thing to do, man.
Well, sure. What I'm hearing you say is I could sign up for this job. I'm a police officer. I love my community, my neighborhood, my fellow man. I want to protect all of these freedoms that we have in this great country. I realize I could die, but now you're talking about all of the sudden a situation takes place in the community that you're sworn to defend. And now it is life threatening for you and for everybody else. My level of training for that is much less than my normal day-to-day experiences, albeit I still need to know how to do it. And I need to stay fresh on it. That's what I'm hearing. Makes a lot of sense.
Correct. 100%.
Correct.
Yeah. What do you want to go back to the video?
Yeah, man. Let's get into it. Let's go deeper.
24th, 2022. The district releasing hours of never-before-seen footage showing a response caught amid confusion and chaos. At 11:40 a.m., just minutes after the shooter entered the school, you can see officers treating his grandmother, the first victim, who ID'd her own grandson, as the gunman.
Salvador Ramos. Apparently he just shot his grandmother.
Outside Robb Elementary, as precious time passed.
Sure.
Panicked parents
Right,
heard
go pause it.
shouting at a
So I can tell you right now, just on my end, there's too much talking, right? These officers are standing around. And again, I'm not trying to dog them. I'm not trying to, I just got to be honest. There's too much talking. There's too much planning. Shots are fired. They're in a school. Kids are in danger. You've got to press now, right? Victims, you're going to be stepping over victims. I'm sorry, grandma who got hurt. I'm going to be stepping over you and I'm going to go put that threat down. And when it stops, I'll come back and help you. But until
Okay.
that time, I don't know where the threat is. I'm going.
Yeah. Let me just make sure I'm understanding. When you say you've got to press now, what I'm hearing you say is, as a police officer, I'm going to walk towards the shots.
I'm running. I'm not even walking.
I'm running towards the shots, and I'm not stopping for anything until I get to those shots.
More or less. I mean, there's a lot of nuances that we can get into, but
yeah, sure. But I'm hearing you say you're walking past people that are shot and injured.
Yeah. Well, and then also too, like Eric was talking about, their verbals. If you don't go, I'm going to go, dude. You already should have went. Like it shouldn't be a question about who's going to go. You've got to press in that.
Ducking down behind corners and crouching down. You're protecting yourself, right? You got to go protect somebody else.
Yeah. So you can turn it back on. There's just a couple things that just jump out to us for sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's what's flashing through my mind now is the process in the proper training is, here I'm thinking in my mind, I see grandma laying there on the ground shot. I'm going to stop and help her out. And you're saying, no, I got to keep going.
Because I'm shot fired, you're going.
Okay. Yeah.
If you've got active stimulus, whether it be shots fired or screaming, or you already know, you have an idea where the shooter or the bad guy is in the school, especially because they're kids, right? Like, it's like, I know we shouldn't think human life's worth human life, but when they're kids, they're so, like, they can't protect themselves. So they're at the mercy of your rapid response.
Makes sense. All right, we're going to keep digging in.
Authorities to do something. By 12 p.m., with dozens of armed officers lining hallways, the school's police chief, Pete Arredondo, began pleading with the gunman, barricaded inside a classroom.
These are innocent children, sir. Please talk to me.
Better play, because.
Please talk to me, sir.
No response is ever heard.
I need cover. I got more kids.
Nearby, other officers tried to clear classrooms of terrified students and teachers.
Oh, pass.
Hey, Britt, let's go stop this, and we'll wrap up this episode 1 because we're going to need at least probably 2 or 3 more to do this.
To get this through.
You do not de-escalate with someone who's already killed children. They should have been pushing into that room. Again, like Eric said, we're not here to like disparage departments or how they operate things. From our perspective, they were treating that situation as a hostage barricade.
Yeah.
But it was an active shooter or an active aggressor. Killing had already been done.
So that should be more of a hostage rescue.
And also, he already shot his grandma. So, like, you can't – you've got to be able to just go.
He's shown the means. He's shown the method. He's shown the intent. So he's already proven that he's willing to do it. But, that's a whole tactical mindset that doesn't really get trained out to the patrol level.
But what I'm hearing you say is there potentially are some scenarios where you do some kind of hostage negotiation. You don't just push, right?
Correct.
Or no?
Yes, in different situations, there's different levels, but
that all comes down to training.
Yes,
it's situational. It's like situational. Sure. So if like no violence has been committed yet, and they haven't showed that propensity for violence, you may negotiate. He's already killed people, so like.
But even on this, from what I've read, I think those officers stood in that hallway for 76 minutes. So 76 minutes trying to negotiate with a guy who's actually shooting kids in a classroom, to me is it's just plain ridiculous.
And then again, too, like Eric said, I've said we don't know how they were trained, but at the same time, it's like at a certain point. The preservation of life has to mean more than you pissing off your police chief and just saying, Chief, I'm going in. Right. Yep. So I think politics got involved in there too. If the police chief's there and negotiating.
I go back to when I had a boss. Beg for forgiveness.
Which is a horrible, horrible thing to have. Your police chief should not be negotiating with the active shooter.
Correct.
So
we might need to wrap this one up and go to episode 2.
So knowing your roles and then just actually, following through with them. But like, they had administrative stress on them because their police chief was there. I would think. I'm sure.
Yeah, well, guys, I can tell you, even just in a couple things I learned 3 times. This scenario, a lot of others could have been handled differently, maybe different outcomes. I just appreciate you guys breaking this down. I'm sure everybody listening does too. We'll catch you on the next one.